Welcome to the N1 Fitness Podcast. I'm your host as always, Marcus Sadu, and today we've got a bit of a different episode set up for you. So two of my clients are on the show. One of them is currently working with me. The other one worked with me prior, and it's a role reversal setup. So they are interviewing me, and we're going to get into a whole bunch of different stuff. So we're going to chat about how my business and personal life has been impacted by COVID-19, what is different about my programs versus other programs potentially, what type of person has the most fat loss success, and what I see those commonalities are between people that do really well versus not so well. We're going to dig into some self-sabotage stuff, what the most common weight loss complaint I come across, how valuable the scale is for your weight loss progress, what my favorite treat meal or go-to treat meals are, how I know when to adjust a program or a client's program to avoid fat loss plateaus. So we're going to dig into that, how I handle my cravings and how I work around them, the best type of exercise for fat loss, how accurate devices like Apple Watches and Fitbits are for assessing calories burned. And then we're going to wrap up with my thoughts on BMI or body mass index. So this is going to be part one of two parts because we just ended up talking for a good while. They had lots of questions. So this is going to be part one. Part two will be coming next week. And I hope you enjoy it.
So obviously we'll start with the current situation as everyone's facing and in the global pandemic. How has COVID-19 affected your business and you personally?
So fortunately, my business hasn't been impacted, actually. I think it's still steady. And I think that people are realizing how important health is right now. It's just magnified because for at least our lives and our parents' lives, health has never been more important than it is right now. And, you know, keeping a healthy immune system and moving and all that sort of stuff. So fortunately, my business hasn't been impacted. I'm lucky that way. As far as personally goes, I wouldn't be in Vancouver right now. I would be in a warm country and living a bit of a different lifestyle. But yeah, as far as business goes, I've been super lucky. And then personally, I mean, I'm just going through the same things that everybody else is going through. There's nothing unique to me. I think everybody wants to get out there and socialize and, you know, see their friends and hug their family and stuff. But yeah, it's pretty much the same for everybody on that front.
Have you seen an impact on your clients in their weekly questionnaires?
Yes, the mental and emotional aspects are coming to the surface quicker and more often right now. So I don't think that anything new is happening I don't think that new issues are developing right now. I think that the current situation is magnifying whatever issues were going on in the background. They're just bringing them to the surface. So for myself, I have been feeling this like frustration and some annoyance and things like that because the situation I feel very controlled. Like I had to fly back from Mexico. I can't go where I want to go when I want to go, and I can't hop on a plane and I can't do this and that. And so it's bringing sort of this underlying frustration or annoyance up at me, but I can't say that wasn't going on under the surface to begin with. It's just the current situation is magnifying it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Actually, some fun fact, I don't know if you guys heard this, but the divorce rate in Wuhan, the divorce rate is spiked. Like people are filing for divorce and stuff like that. And it's like, well, is it because this disease is causing divorce, or is it because the current situation is magnifying issues that people are having in their marriages and they're realizing maybe life's too short and they're spending way more time with their spouses than they were before? And so, again, I think it's just bringing things to the surface that were already there. It's just the situation is magnifying them.
That's so true. I heard that for Australia too. But then I also heard yesterday, because I'm in the wedding industry, that the marriage licenses are going crazy in Wuhan, China now. Like everyone's just trying to get married now that they can.
What, like for financial reasons, or what's the reason?
I think just the gatherings, like now that they can actually gather and have a wedding, I guess they haven't seen such a spike in marriage licenses like they have in the last few days.
That's interesting, because I think that also sort of the contrary to that, as far as issues being magnified, is that people are seeing that life is short, and so they might be like, you know what, I want to get married now because I love this person and I care about them. So it can sort of work both ways. That makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. That's our little lovely situation as well with Ray and I, because there's just so many things that you keep seeing, like so many people are in the same boat, especially because we were supposed to be married a month from today. But it's just sort of, I think, telling yourself that it's out of your control. There's literally nothing you can do. And, you know, there's sort of I really believe that like everything happens for a reason. And so not sure what this reason is exactly, but it's just kind of the way it is right now. And everyone's in it together. So I think, I don't know about you both, but like I feel more connected to people now than I did before this even started, which is crazy. So I think there's some really nice silver linings in it.
Yeah, I totally agree that there's going to be a ton of learning that's going to come out of this. Absolutely. It's not like it's wasted time. That's for sure.
For sure. Okay, so transitioning into something a little lighter. So Marcus, you and your program, what would you say sets you and N1 Fitness apart from other nutrition coaches and other nutritional programs that are out there?
So this is actually a tough question to answer, because I haven't worked with any other nutrition coaches. Like that, my experience is how I've coached my clients. And so, to be honest, you guys would be more qualified to answer this question than I would even. I have theories as far as why I think what I do is effective, but as far as what other coaches are doing, or, you know, why things have clicked for you guys. I mean, Carmen, you had a ton of success on the program. You lost like 30 pounds in 4 months, and you're like, you're like what, 5'2"?
5'3" and a quarter.
Nice.
So 5'1". Okay, cool. So like what clicked for you? Like, why do you think that you were successful doing this program versus a different program?
I think when I did some research, your method and sort of what you put out there right away was just it's simple. Like nothing was too complicated. There weren't ads popping up all over the screen. It was just sort of, this is who you are. This was, you had your own transformation story. And I think that really resonated with me, because you weren't always, you know, the healthiest, most fit person. You've gone through the same transition that all of your clients have. And as someone looking at that, I thought, oh, it's nice to relate to someone who's been through a similar situation, I think. And with you, there was no guesswork. It's laid out super simple. And if you follow the plan, you'll have success. Like that's literally what it comes down to. And I think for sure I had moments, like I remember emailing you, I think it was May or something. And I was like, hey, I'm ready I want to do the program, but I'm not ready in this moment. And you're like, sounds great. Like, you know where to find me when you are ready. And I think it was like you were sort of there, and I knew you would always kind of be there. And then when I was finally in end of August, September, it was like, okay, let's get to it. And I think too, for being a client, you have to be in the right mind frame to start this. That's at least what I found, because I knew in May, I'm like, I know I want to do this, but I'm just not in like the mental space. And when I finally was, and I got the program, I was totally ready. And I think just knowing that you're there like every step of the way, if there's a slip up or something that happens, it's just nice knowing that, that support is there. But there's nothing overcomplicated about your program. And I think that is the main takeaway. And truly anyone can do it if they just set their mind to it, really.
I think that's a really important point as far as you being ready, because I could have the best program or the worst program in the world, but if you're not ready, it's the same result, right? It really is irrelevant. So it starts with you. And then as far as why I think it works, I like to use an integrated approach. So as you guys have experienced, like there's the physical piece, the mental piece, the emotional piece, possibly even the spiritual piece if somebody was open to that. And I think that I attract people that are after a little bit more than, the protein, carbs, and fat. It's like, just eat this. And it's like, I think that we all know what to do, but how we integrate that and how, the mental and emotional aspects tie in with that stuff is very complicated. And everybody is truly different when it comes to how all of those pieces of the puzzle come together. And so from a truly, like just a nutrition standpoint, like you said, there's nothing special about my programs. Like there's no secret food that people are eating. There's no like tricks. Like it's just, how do we integrate all the pieces together and weave together a lifestyle that you can maintain and sustain long term? And I think that it's important. I didn't used to do this. I used to, when I first started, I would assume that my clients' goals were the same as my goals. I would be like, well, I want to get super lean. So like, I'm sure my client wants to get just as lean as I do or wants to take things just as seriously as I do. And that's not true. Not everybody has the same goals. Somebody might be super happy at, 20% body fat where somebody else wants to get to 10. And so meeting people where they're at is super, super important versus projecting my goals onto that person just because, they're mine. And something that I've experienced too is knowing when to push somebody and encourage them, or knowing when to pull back, knowing what to say. I put a lot of thought into how I word emails and make them as clear as possible, because just with it being an email-based interaction and coaching process, the communication needs to be very clear. And probably the last thing would be working on myself has probably showed me more about my clients than anything. Like having the experience, like you said, of being overweight, like I've experienced that. I know what it's like, and it's extremely difficult to overcome that. But when there's somebody who has had a six-pack their entire lives, and then they're like, hey, like just, move more and eat less. And you're like, if they don't understand what that experience is like, it's just different. The people that have gone through it have a lot more insight into what that experience is like. And I think that has helped me as well. So I guess, the integration of the physical, mental, emotional factors, and then like you said, someone being ready is super, super key as far as how they're going to succeed.
Yeah. Agreed.
And what would you say clients on your program do to become the most successful?
They follow the program, that's for sure. However, at the end of the day, you gotta stick to the program. Now, that doesn't mean that it's like, to a T. Like nobody sticks to the program to a T. People get super close, but life happens, stuff happens, things pop up, you make the best of a certain situation. But I think that the two things that stick out to me the most are accountability. So someone saying, I couldn't do X because of blank, versus someone saying, I just didn't do X, you know? And if somebody is making, I don't want to say excuses sounds harsh, but if there are other outside circumstances that happen to just be constantly influencing why someone can't stick to the program, I think that it's very important for that person to realize that they're probably just interested and not committed. Like the interest piece comes in where somebody, you do it when it's convenient, right? You're like, when you're interested in someone, you're like all the pieces have to fall into place perfectly in order for you to succeed. But if one thing goes awry, it's like, fuck, couldn't do it. Couldn't make it happen today. Versus the person that's committed, they're not going to accept anything but results. They're going to make the best of whatever situation comes up and make it work. It might not be ideal, but they're going to make the best of whatever pops up day to day. And then the second thing is just consistency. Like, it can get monotonous, you know, like you just sort of have to embrace that. I think that the consistency piece is one of the number one reasons why people don't get results. It's impatience. It's like, you know, and if you sort of take a step back and look at it, if you've had 30, 40, 50, 60 years of habits building up to this point, and you think that you're going to, you know, undo that in 4 weeks, 8 weeks, like that's crazy. That's crazy. So it takes time, it takes consistent effort, and I'd rather somebody be, you know, 80% on point 100% of the time versus perfect, you know, like 30% of the time or 40% of the time. That person just doesn't get the results versus that, you know, it might be a little slower out of the gate. The results might come a little bit slower, but they're going to be maintained and sustained long term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And so speaking about your clients, usually at the end of your podcast, you say, if you're interested in personalized one-on-one nutritional coaching, feel free to reach out. So have you ever had clients reach out that haven't been the right fit for you? And if you have, why would that be?
Yes. Yeah, I have, for sure. I'm not willing to take on anybody because not every coach is for everybody and not everybody is for every coach. And so I typically can weed out the person who is less committed to begin with. My questionnaire is not short. Like, you guys have filled it out. It's not short. You got to take the pictures. Like, you got to want to send me all that stuff. There is, like, you know, sort of almost like a weeding out process in that. And it's designed that way on purpose because I want the people who want to get results and who are committed to getting results. And so filling out a 40-question questionnaire, you know, putting on a bathing suit, snapping pictures at the right angles. If I ask somebody to redo them, like, that might deter someone. You know what I mean? So there's a weeding out process there where it sort of just sorts itself out. And even in the language, a lot of the time I can tell if somebody is not committed or if I just don't hear from them or whatever. So I think that the application process typically sorts that out. And yeah, not everybody's the right fit.
And what percentage of your clients would you say have reached their goal weight and continue to maintain it afterwards?
I don't know the exact percentage, but as far as diet stats go, there's a 95% failure rate in the diet research, which is insane. Now, that means that 95% of people regain all of their lost weight within, you know, a year or two. Like, it's not promising stuff. I know my rate is much higher than that. It's much higher than 95%. But I reach out to people at least twice a year, every single person that I've ever worked with. And I don't actually necessarily ask them, like, hey, are you still on track or whatever? I ask them, hey, like, how are things? How's it going? And if they want to engage with how they're doing at the time, or if they're struggling, or if they're doing great, I just sort of leave the table open for that. But I don't want to put any pressure on anybody, because a lot of the times there can be some embarrassment if people put on weight. It happens all the time. Like, they might have lost, 20 pounds, and maybe they put 10 pounds back on. And sometimes people, they just feel kind of shitty about it. They're like, damn, like, I should have been able to maintain those losses, or whatever it is. So I don't really push gathering those statistics from people, because I want them to share them if they want to share them and where they're at. And if people want to sign up with me again because they feel like, they need a refresher, or it took more than 12 or 20 weeks to get those habits in place, that happens too. But I don't have exact numbers, just because I don't really search them out. And also, it's just so easy to fall off track. I mean, a breakup, a vacation can throw you off track, where you just like, it spirals out of control, and all of a sudden you wake up 6 months later and you're like, oh my God, I'm 20 pounds heavier. Like, that happens. Or a family member dies. Like, there's just so much more to the process than like, protein, carbs, and fat.
Yeah, it's so true. And like, for me, during all this stuff going on, like, it's been sort of like a roller coaster of emotion. And I think it was last weekend, I was just like, oh my gosh. And I ordered in. I actually was like, I got a lettuce burger, so I was, pretty good still.
You badass.
Yeah. And like, Ray made some bread and I ate that and stuff, but I just still, because I've been really consistent still. But even after that, I'm like, oh, I feel so gross. So I'm like, hey, you know what? And what I did, which I personally found helpful, is I went back and I read some of my answers to your questions when I was on the program of how I was feeling. Because like 99% of the time, I was feeling so good. So just kind of rereading my own messages was like, okay, here's a reset and let's get back onto it. So it's just, for me, it's just kind of going back to that and how I feel. And I think I've lost 4 pounds since I ended my program, but now I'm in my traffic light system and just keeping track of that. So yeah, I think it's definitely, it's really hard, and it's a lot of stuff to do with your mind and thinking, and it's easy to just snap your fingers and be completely off track. But that's why those questionnaires are so helpful, even though, yes, I must admit sometimes they're tedious just to answer them, but it's actually really rewarding and worth it, I think.
That's such a good point, as far as going back and reading sort of where you were at, because we're so adaptable that, it's not like you feel amazing and then you feel like absolute garbage the next day if you start to fall off track with your nutrition. It's this gradual downward process, and you adapt along the way. You adapt day by day to feeling that way. It's not like you're super energetic one day and then you have no energy the next day. It's like this gradual downward curve. And so we just adapt along the way. So you can be 6 months down the road and you're like, oh my God, I feel like shit, and I didn't even notice it until right now. What happened with the last 6 months? But going back and reading those questions, which is a really cool thing to do, I love that, is you're like, whoa, I can even tell in my written word that I felt way better. Like, I'm super energetic and I'm excited about the day and I'm sleeping amazing, all that sort of stuff. So that's a really good tool.
Yeah, it's helped me. So I don't know, it might help other people too. Now, have you ever had clients who have self-sabotaged? And if so, what advice, or how did you get them kind of through a funk?
I have never had a client that hasn't self-sabotaged. It is, and I do it too. I mean, it's not a matter of do people self-sabotage or not. It's a matter of to what degree. So there is, one end of the scale might be like, I didn't even grocery shop. I ran through the drive-through like 6 times this week, and I've been hungover, 5 out of 7 days. Like, that's some serious self-sabotage going on. And then there's the other end of the spectrum where somebody might make a really small decision like, hey, I'm going out for the day and I'm not sure how long I'm going to be out. Maybe I should take a meal because I don't feel like eating out, but fuck it, I'll just leave. And then they find themselves out, and then they make, a less than optimal choice, and then they beat themselves up after about it. It's like, why not just take the meal? Like, what's the harm in taking the meal? You can always just take it back home after. So that would be like a super light version of self-sabotage, but it's just this sliding scale where it's just a degree question, not an if question. And as far as how to go about that, first of all, identifying it. Like, if somebody thinks that they don't self-sabotage, that is the problem right there. That is self-sabotage, by thinking that they don't do it, right? Because they're just completely not aware of it. So first of all, you need to establish that it's happening. And then second of all, use tactics to work around it. And so set yourself up for success. Like, if somebody wants to lose weight and they have all sorts of like ice cream and treats and shit in the freezer 10 steps away, that's self-sabotage. Like, why would you do that to yourself? You're making it so much harder than it needs to be. It's like, you want to be in a monogamous relationship and you're like hanging out at the Playboy Mansion like 5 days a week. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like, why make it harder for yourself, So, I mean, and at the end of the day too, I think that with something like that, self-sabotage is really closely linked in with establishing what you truly want. Because if I have ice cream and all sorts of treats really easily accessible, and I know that I'm susceptible to that just from an evolutionary standpoint, is weight loss really what I'm after? Like, do I really want that? Or, am I just keeping that stuff around because, maybe there's some underlying feelings of, no, weight loss is really not my priority right now. And that's fine. That's fine. But telling yourself that it is when it isn't can almost cause more stress than just admitting to yourself it's not a priority.
And what is the most common complaint you've had from your clients, would you say?
Most common complaint? It's probably filling out the questions and taking the pictures. It's like, oh my God, I don't want to do it. And it's just one of those things that it's baked into the cake. You got to do it to assess progress. And actually, in my opinion, I've had people ask me if they could do the program and not send pictures. And I say no, unfortunately, that's a requirement. And if you don't want to take the pictures, that's totally cool. But I'm not willing to work with somebody that's not willing to take pictures, because in my opinion, it's sort of irresponsible, because I'm only going off of what they're saying, and I need that visual input as well, as far as what to do with the program. Sometimes what people say is very different than what's really going on, right? Like, actions speak louder than words. And so I need that information in order to coach someone to the best of my ability. So it's probably the questions and the pictures, but people are always happy about the pictures, like that they took them after, because they're like, oh my God, it's so awesome to see how far I've come. I didn't want to take the pictures to begin with because it can bring up a lot of, emotional stuff for people. They're like, oh my God, they're really sobering. Like, you look at those pictures and you're like, fuck, that's where I'm at. Okay. But they're always happy about it afterwards. And it's so rewarding to look back to see how far you've come, because you see yourself in the mirror every day. But when you look at those pictures, and again, that process is gradual, but when you look at those pictures and you compare them side by side, it's crazy. You really get to see how far you've come. So that's without a doubt the most common complaint. And then the questions, like you said, Carmen, they can be tedious, but it's almost by design, because a lot of the time, some of the questions are like, how many hours did you sleep per night this week? And people have never tracked that in their lives. Like, they literally don't know how much they've slept, or, how's my digestion? And they just don't, they've come to adapt to like this, their digestion, they're just bloated 24/7, and they never really thought about it. They thought that was normal because they've never experienced anything different. Or what did you learn this week is a question, or what are you grateful for? And it's just stuff that they haven't really thought of. So it's work to fill out the questions, but I think that they're really valuable as far as what they provide.
And I think also for after the program too, like I said, refer to the questionnaire still. I still look back at my pictures because, yeah, even during the process, I was like, oh, I feel like nothing's changed. And then you go like from 1 week to the next, and like, oh my gosh, there's actually a huge difference. And that's a motivator to keep going for sure.
Yeah. So, and if you're like, oh man, I don't feel that great right now, and you look at a question or a set of weekly questions where you were feeling really good, and you look at what your nutrition was like, what your sleep was like, how you were feeling stress-wise, and how much you were moving, and then you compare it to what you're doing right now, you're like, oh, okay, I'm not there, right? And so it just becomes very clear on what you need to do to move forward to feel better.
Yeah, exactly.
What about the scale? Do you have people who don't want to weigh themselves from week to week?
I don't know. Do I?
Yeah. You seem to be okay with that.
Once in a while, I'm okay with it. But the weight, the scale weight is a really, really good indicator of progress. It is what it is. Like you can't, like the number is the number. The stats don't lie. And so if you want to lose weight and the scale is not trending down, you're not losing weight. And so it's one of those sobering things where between that, the questions and the pictures, it gives me a really good indicator of what's really going on. And, if I get somebody to do a food diary and it looks fucking perfect, but their weight's not trending down, it's like, something's off here. So it just gives us information as far as what to address and what to do moving forward. So the scale weight's really important. I completely disagree with people that are like, the scale is not important. I fundamentally disagree with that. If you're not losing weight, or if your scale weight isn't trending down, you're not losing weight. Simple as that.
Now, on your program, you let clients have a treat meal once a week. So do you ever have a treat meal? And if so, how often and what do you usually have?
Yeah, I mix in some treats here and there. I really like, so my favorite pizza place is Parlor in Yaletown. You guys have been there, right?
Oh, I've actually never eaten there, but
oh my God, the pizza's so good. I love their pizza, so I might do something like that. But I don't handle dairy well, and so it's sort of a trade-off. Like my skin just acts up immediately. So fortunately, I'm too vain to eat dairy often because I want my skin to be good. So it's like a deterrent from doing that. But I really like Coconut Bliss ice cream. That stuff is incredible. But again, I don't eat regular ice cream just because of the dairy. And as far as how often, I don't really think about it like that. It's just, right now I'm actually gaining weight on purpose, and I'm in like a muscle building phase. So it means that I'm eating above my maintenance calorie intake, which means I'm never hungry. And it sounds awesome to people when they're like, they have weight loss as a goal. You're like, oh my God, you're like never hungry. But you're like just kind of over full all the time. It's actually not enjoyable. I'd rather just eat less, but it's a necessary part of the process. So right now, specifically, treat meals are like the furthest thing from my mind because of my weight gain goal. But if I was in a fat loss phase, I'm sure that it would be, it would be more of a priority for me. But gummies too. Like I love those like gummy candies.
Oh, like
yeah. See,
like
everybody's
gummy
different.
bears?
Yeah, like gummy bears. Like some people love chips and like all that sort of stuff. The chips don't do it for me, but like the gummy candies, like those sour dinosaur candies, like I just love those things.
What about those healthy ones that are called like Smart Sweet?
Oh yeah, the ones with lots of fiber, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so those still have calories. I've had a lot of people eating those recently, and they're They're slightly less calories, but those definitely still have calories. So if you're comparing them, 1-to-1, yeah, the fiber ones are probably, the Smart Sweets are probably a better way to go, but it's important to remember that that's still like dessert, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And how do you know when to adjust the quantities food-wise on someone's program?
This is sort of an impossible question to answer because it's so complex. Sometimes it's straightforward where someone's like really on track and it's like, we just need to reduce calories here. But there are so many different factors that play into adjustments because every single interaction that I've had with that person has led me to that point to make those changes or not. Does that make sense? Like every single interaction. And so really the only person that is making that decision from the place that I'm making it is me, because I might have 10 weeks experience interacting with that person leading up to that point that makes me potentially make an adjustment. And so if I think, well, this person, if I reduce calories in this spot, maybe it's a dinner meal, I feel like this person might be more likely to overeat to a further degree because it might kick up hunger, or maybe they have a specific time during the day where they're used to snacking and they really like snacking, so I might move food to that spot and bias it from another spot. So sometimes it's straightforward, but typically it's like incredibly complex, and some of it is just intuitive, to be honest. I've had the experience of working with people for years and years, and that I know you guys probably don't like that answer, but it's like it's so complex because it's every single interaction with that person has led me to that specific point in making changes. Does that add up?
Yeah, it makes sense.
And it's probably easy too, because I remember, I think my first week I had like fruit at every meal, and I was like, oh, that's so much fruit. So my next week I was like, I don't need that much fruit, and you just took it off. So that was easy. Yeah,
totally. And it's like, oh, okay, she wasn't eating it anyway. Like, well, there you go.
Yeah. So that's probably helpful. You might, I think you kind of answered this before, but about binge eating or craving. So if you're like craving coconut bliss or whatever, do you just go for it and just satisfy that craving, or how do you handle that?
Okay, so first of all, the evolutionary mechanism at play is really important because people feel guilt about having like cravings and indulging, and we are literally wired to burn as few calories as possible while eating as many calories as possible in the shortest amount of time. And so we have a food abundant environment now, whereas for our entire evolution, we didn't. And so we had mechanisms at place that drove us towards wanting to yield as many calories as we could in the shortest amount of time because food wasn't abundant. Now we have the exact opposite issue. And so, first of all, it's important not to judge the drive to want to eat because everybody's got it. It's built into us. Secondly, if I just have a craving, I might indulge that craving sometimes and other times not. If somebody says that they're not, like they never restrict themselves, they're lying. Whether they're aware of it or not. Like they might have built these awesome habits and put these habits in place that they're not even aware of that has them moderate their intake. But everybody is restricted to one degree or another. So if somebody goes on a diet and they're like, I just don't want to feel restricted. And it's like, that's impossible because that's the name of the game. And we do this in every other area of life too. It's like you have a fight with your boss or something and you're like, oh my God, I could punch my boss in the face right now, but like you restrict yourself, right? But like for some, you know what I mean? Like something around food, people have this idea that they refuse to feel restricted to any degree. And unfortunately, that is just a recipe, given our evolutionary makeup, to be really overweight, to be just fat and sick, unfortunately. So yeah, I restrict myself. I indulge sometimes, but I also have been at this a long time where, like that person that's not aware of their habits is, like, I just have habits in place that lend themselves to eating better, I guess. And like you said earlier, Carmen, I value above everything else feeling my best. Mm-hmm. That is so important to me on a daily basis that if I'm going to have 4 or 5 drinks, I think about how I'm going to feel the next day. And if I'm going to do that, I accept the fact that I'm probably going to be hungover or not mentally as sharp and, kind of tired. So I try and think about it from that place, and being that feeling good is such a high priority for me, I indulge in things that make me feel not so good less often.
What would you say are the best exercises to speed up the process if you're eating well as well?
The fat loss process?
Yeah.
Exercises is in specific exercises or a type of exercise?
Just like working out, like what types of workouts would you recommend?
So if you're looking at the short-term fat loss process, then probably something that's just going to burn the most amount of calories. But if you're looking at the long-term fat loss process, it's probably weight training, because building muscle and just having muscle on your body is a really, really expensive process from a caloric standpoint. And so you get to consume more calories when you have more muscle. Like if you look at the huge, like muscle-bound 250-pound bodybuilders, like they struggle to eat enough. Like they'll lose weight if they don't eat enough, because they have to fuel all that muscle. Not to mention they're walking around with 100 pounds worth of rocks in their back all day. So they're, you know what I mean? That's basically what, they're just carrying around a huge body. And that's expensive from a caloric standpoint. And so somebody's looking at the short term, I would say, maybe running or cycling. Like running has a fairly demanding caloric burn to it. But in the long term, it's probably building some muscle because it's very metabolically expensive. So, yeah, it depends on how you want to approach that.
Okay. And I know a while ago you told me that the Apple Watches or Fitbits or whatever you want to call it aren't accurate in counting how many calories you burn during a certain exercise. Yeah. Why do you say that?
The technology is just not there. This is a perfect example. Say you take the bodybuilder that's 250 pounds with tons of muscle at 10% body fat, and then you take a 250-pound person that's super overweight and has 35% body fat. When you enter your information in the Apple Watch, it's giving the same reading back to both of those people. But we just talked about how metabolically expensive muscle is and how many calories it takes. And so the person that has a bunch of muscle is burning way more calories than the person who is at 35% body fat. And that scales. And so that's why.
Is that kind of that's one of our other questions about the body mass index? Because you're entering a height and a weight, but it could be 2 people that are 5'4". One person has 10% body fat, the other has 40. But is that an accurate reading, that BMI scale, or no?
It depends on the person. It's sort of more so geared towards the sick population. That's why it's used. That's why doctors use it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's a very specific population that it's geared towards. But I mean, I'm technically at the very, very top end right now of a healthful BMI, which is crazy. I'm not overweight. So it depends on the person that it applies to, but it was designed to be used with the sick population. And when you're talking about the healthy population, it's just a completely different story.
Oh, see, no one's ever said that before. And usually, like, whenever the doctors have used it on me just to see, it's like I've always been obese according to that scale. But I'm like, I don't think I look obese.
Yeah, I know. It's sort of like, again, it's a skewed sample because doctors don't see healthy people, right? That by design,
Yeah.
that is, they are dealing with a sick population basically 24/7. And so a lot of the markers in just a regular blood test and stuff is like, they're designed so you're okay, versus thriving, and then on the other end where there's a serious issue. So yeah, the BMI is typically used by people that are dealing with a sick population.
Okay.
So that was part 1 of 2 episodes where the DeCamillis sisters are interviewing me. For the next episode, that's coming next week, and we're going to dig into things like what I eat in a normal day, how I order at restaurants, my thoughts on cleanses and detox diets, the ketogenic diet, vegans, vegetarians, how I keep up with media health trends and documentaries like Game Changers, some of the podcasts that I listen to, my 3 top tips for someone starting on their fat loss journey, as well as what the toughest aspect of fat loss actually is. So is it physical? Is it mental? Is it emotional? So we're going to delve into that stuff too. So if you enjoyed this episode, let me know, and maybe we can put together more episodes like this. So I'd love to get your feedback. I hope you enjoyed part 1. Part 2 is coming next week, and I will see you then.